Your life can collapse without making a sound, not through catastrophe, but through slow erosion, the quiet decay of discipline, the weight of unresolved fears, the silent drift away from the man you were meant to become. It was not a technique. It was a return, a deliberate walk back into the core of one's spirit, where illusions are stripped away and the true warrior is reforged. This story follows a young man named Riku who reaches a breaking point. His ambitions have dissolved. His purpose is fractured. His strength has thinned into frustration. And beneath the noise, a deeper truth calls to him, a truth his ego has been avoiding. When Riku's failures become undeniable, he seeks a reclusive monk rumored to rebuild broken warriors from the inside out. A man known only as Master Haku, keeper of the old Shintei path. What Riku learns is not comfort. It is confrontation, a journey into silence, discipline, and the harsh light of presence. Because rebuilding your life is not about creating something new, but about destroying everything false and returning to the ground where your truest self waits. Riku had always believed that collapse would be loud, a dramatic failure, a public humiliation, some unmistakable moment where life cracked open. But real collapse, the kind that erodes a man from the inside, arrives quietly, like slow rain eating through stone, like a rope fraying fiber by fiber until one day it simply snaps. On the surface, Riku looked fine. He went to work. He smiled when expected. He answered messages with the usual scripted enthusiasm. But inside, something was sinking. He felt it in the morning when his alarm rang and his body refused to move. He felt it when he stared at unfinished tasks, unable to summon even a spark of determination. The fire that once lived inside him had thinned into ash, scattered by doubts he never admitted aloud. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was emptiness, a hollow space where purpose used to stand. Every habit he once relied on had begun to crumble. His morning routine, his focus at work, his evening plans to improve himself, all gone, replaced by numb scrolling, half-slept nights, and the strange comfort of procrastination. Riku tried to rationalize it, but deep down he knew the truth. He had drifted too far from the man he wanted to become. The ego is a clever architect. It builds excuses with precision. It disguises fear as logic. It speaks in soft lies to keep a man from confronting his own weakness. Riku believed those lies for far too long, until the day everything broke. He had been working on a project, something that once excited him, something he believed would elevate his career. Weeks of planning, hours of effort, countless promises to deliver. The deadline came and passed. He froze. He avoided calls. He ignored the messages stacking up. And when his supervisor finally confronted him, Riku saw disappointment, not anger, and that hurt far more. For a brief moment, he felt as if the walls around his life had crumbled, revealing the truth beneath. He was not failing because he lacked potential. He was failing because he had abandoned himself. That night, he sat alone in his room, surrounded by the silence he always tried to avoid. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to see his own collapse. Not as a dramatic event, but as a slow decay born from inattention, distraction, and the slow suffocation of discipline. Tears did not come. Instead, there was a numb acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement that he had reached a point where something had to change. The moment when the story you tell about yourself no longer matches who you are. In Japan, the old warriors had a different word, Shintei, the rebuilding of the self from the foundation. But Riku didn't know that word yet. All he knew was that he needed help, guidance, a path back to the strength he had lost. And so the search began, not with a loud vow or a dramatic declaration, but with a faint memory of an old rumor. A hermit in the northern mountains, a monk who rebuilt broken men, a keeper of an ancient system that stripped away weakness and forged unshakable presence. That whisper of hope was enough. Riku decided. He would go. He would confront the truth at its source. The collapse had revealed itself. Now came the first step toward rebuilding. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, not easier, but clearer, as if the fog around his life had briefly parted. Riku woke before the alarm, not from motivation, but from an uncomfortable awareness. If he didn't stand up now, he might never stand up again. He moved through the room slowly, noticing how neglected everything was. Clothes piled on the chair, books he once promised to read gathering dust. A mirror smudged and ignored, reflecting a man who looked older than his years, not in age, but in spirit. He paused in front of that mirror. His eyes were tired, his posture slouched, his breath shallow. This was not the warrior he once imagined he'd become, not the man he told others he was working to be. And for a moment, the weight of self-deception pressed hard on his chest. The human mind is built to avoid pain, including emotional truth. Neuroscientists call it cognitive dissonance avoidance. When reality threatens our self-image, we look away. We numb ourselves with entertainment, with routine, with denial. Riku had mastered these escapes. But now, with nowhere left to hide, he allowed the truth to settle. His collapse was not sudden. It was earned through 1,000 small concessions. Every time he chose ease instead of effort, distraction instead of presence, comfort instead of discipline. That sentence carried more power than he expected, because it was the first honest thing he'd said to himself in months. He spent the day searching for answers, not online, not in self-help videos, but in old memories. His grandfather used to tell stories about warriors who lived in the mountains, men who walked away from society to face themselves in the silence of nature, men who rebuilt their spirits with ancient practices. One story stood out, about a monk who lived beyond the northern peaks, a teacher who didn't give advice, but transformation, a mentor who demanded total honesty and absolute surrender of ego. Riku had always dismissed it as folklore, but desperation has a way of turning myths into possibilities. That evening, as the sun sank behind the city skyline, Riku made a decision that startled even him. He opened his laptop and began searching for any reference, any clue, any hint of this mountain hermit. He found almost nothing. A half-translated forum post, a blurry photograph of a distant temple. The lack of information didn't discourage him. It ignited something. If the path was hidden, perhaps it was meant only for those who searched with sincerity. He felt fear rise in his chest. Fear of leaving, fear of failing, fear of confronting himself without the noise of modern life. But beneath the fear, something deeper stirred, resolve. By midnight, his mind was set. He packed lightly, just enough to survive the journey. And with each item he placed in his bag, he felt a subtle shift inside him, as if shedding the weight of excuses he had carried for so long. Before going to bed, he stood at the window and looked out at the city lights. Everywhere he saw movement, noise, distraction, lives spinning in circles, just as his had been. He didn't know what awaited him in the mountains. He didn't know the hardships or the truths he would face. He only knew that staying in the same place, internally and externally, was no longer an option. That night, Riku fell asleep with a rare feeling resting in his chest. Not hope, but the willingness to pursue it. The road toward the northern mountains was not meant for comfort. It stretched across barren fields, empty villages, and winding paths carved by centuries of travelers who came seeking answers or escaping them. Riku's journey began before sunrise. A single backpack, a thermos of water, and a quiet determination that felt unfamiliar yet strangely grounding. The air grew colder with each passing hour. The city sounds faded behind him, replaced by the whisper of wind sliding across the earth. Out here, the silence was not empty. It carried weight, like the world was paying attention to his steps. By midday, Riku reached the foothills where the climb truly began. The mountains rose like ancient guardians, stone faces weathered by storms and time. Their presence alone demanded humility. He paused, feeling a sudden surge of doubt. Fear loves questions without answers. But Riku pressed forward, not because he felt brave, but because he knew the cost of turning back, returning to a life where he was already disappearing. The incline steepened. His breath quickened. Sweat chilled on his skin as the temperature dropped with elevation. Every step felt like a confrontation with the parts of himself he had avoided. Psychologists say physical strain lowers ego defenses, revealing hidden thoughts. The mountains seemed to know this truth. With each stretch of trail, more of Riku's internal noise rose to the surface. He remembered the project he failed, the friends he had drifted away from, the routines he had abandoned. Each memory felt like a stone in his pack. By late afternoon, fatigue set in, the kind of fatigue that strips a man down to his essentials. Riku rested on a flat rock, overlooking a valley cloaked in mist. For the first time since leaving home, he allowed himself a long breath. In the silence, something became clear. Discipline had not left him. He had left it. The thought hit hard. It was no longer anger or shame, but a realization delivered with the precision of an ancient blade. He stood again, feeling lighter, not physically, but inwardly. The climb resumed. The final stretch of the trail grew narrow and unforgiving. Snow lined the path in fading patches, and the air carried the sting of the coming night. The sky dimmed to a muted gold as the sun dipped behind the peaks. Then, through the trees, Riku saw it. A small structure perched on a ledge, a weathered temple built of dark wood and stone. Smoke rose from a chimney in slow, deliberate spirals. He approached cautiously. No gates, no signs, no welcoming gestures. Just the quiet presence of a place untouched by the modern world. Before he could knock, the door slid open. An old man stood there, robed in simple cloth, posture straight as a blade, eyes calm yet piercing, like he could see the entire story of a person at a glance. Riku froze, breath caught. This was no gentle sage from a storybook. There was nothing soft or comforting about him. His presence felt like standing before a mirror that reflected not the face, but the soul. The old monk spoke first. "You climbed with your legs," he said quietly. His voice held no judgment, only truth. I came to learn," Riku managed. The monk nodded once, slowly. He stepped aside. As Riku crossed the threshold, he felt the weight of his old life press against the door behind him, then fall away. The interior of the temple was nothing like Riku expected. No incense, no golden statues, no symbols of comfort or mysticism. It was bare. A wooden floor, a single mat, a kettle set beside a small iron stove, and along the far wall, tools, not of religion, but of discipline, brooms, buckets, ropes, a stack of rough stones. Master Haku closed the door behind them without turning. His movements were slow, precise, economical, like each gesture had been refined through years of intentional practice. Riku stood awkwardly, trying to quiet his breathing. The silence felt heavier inside the temple, as if it demanded something from him. Haku finally spoke. "Mind?" His tone was not curious, it was testing. Riku felt his throat tighten. I want to rebuild my life. I want discipline again." Haku's interruption cut cleanly through the air. "Huh?" Riku blinked, unsure how to respond. The monk walked past him and sat on the floor, legs crossed, back straight. He motioned for Riku to sit opposite. When Riku complied, Haku's eyes locked onto his with unnerving stillness. "Rebuilding begins with truth," the monk said. Riku frowned. Haku nodded. "You must lose the story you tell yourself, the one that protects your ego." His words struck with the precision of arrows. "Your collapse did not happen this year," Haku continued. Riku lowered his gaze. The shame returned, familiar, unwelcome. But Haku wasn't finished. "You believe you are broken," he said. "You are not." He leaned forward slightly. "Shintei is not healing." The word echoed in the quiet room. Riku felt something stir inside, a mixture of fear and recognition, like a truth he'd always sensed but never dared to confront directly. Haku stood and walked towards the wall of tools. He selected a broom and placed it in Riku's hands. "Clean," he commanded. Riku blinked. Haku's voice sharpened. There was no anger in his tone, just authority, a kind of authority that came not from power, but from absolute conviction. Riku began sweeping, uncertain and self-conscious. The act felt pointless until Haku spoke again. "Most men want transformation," he said. Riku swept again, slower this time, noticing the dirt patterns on the floor. The task demanded presence, not thought. "The mind resists small tasks," Haku continued. "It wants glory, not foundations. But a warrior does not rise by dreaming of the summit." Riku felt his breath deepen as the rhythm of the broom became steady. For the first time, his thoughts quieted. When he finished, Haku inspected the floor with a quick glance. "Good," he said. He returned the broom to its place. "Tomorrow we begin the tearing down." Riku swallowed hard. The weight of those words told him exactly what the next phase would bring. Confrontation, discomfort, the stripping away of every illusion he'd ever used to protect himself. And yet, he felt no desire to retreat. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from the truth. He was walking directly into it. Riku woke before sunrise, not by choice, but by instruction. So Riku hurried through the cold morning air, breath sharp, muscles stiff, and entered the main hall. The floorboards chilled his skin as he sat cross-legged, facing the wall exactly as instructed. Haku entered moments later, silent, composed, ancient in his stillness. He placed a small wooden timer beside Riku. Sand filled the top half. Riku studied the device. "Long enough," Haku answered, then stepped behind him. There were no cushions, no back support, no instructions beyond "don't move." Riku straightened his spine as best he could. Then the training began. The sand fell slowly. Pain arrived quickly. At first it was manageable. A subtle ache in his lower back, a tightness in the hips. He tried counting breaths to distract himself, but Haku interrupted. "Do not flee into distraction," he said. "Sit inside your suffering." So Riku tried, but the silence was brutal. Within minutes his mind erupted. This is pointless. I'm not built for this. Why is this necessary? I should just leave. The storm inside him grew louder than any physical discomfort. Thoughts spiraled, each one sharp enough to cut through his resolve. This was not meditation. This was confrontation. The first confrontation with the false self, the part of the mind built from fear, laziness, ego, and stories meant to protect comfort. Haku's voice broke through the chaos. Good. Riku clenched his jaw. Pain is not your enemy, Haku replied. Riku's breath shook. His legs throbbed. His thoughts screamed at him to stand, to move, to reject the exercise and walk out. But something deeper held him still. A faint awareness that this moment, this internal war, was exactly what had been missing from his life. Haku circled him like a silent sentinel. The false self, he said, is a master of deception. It whispers comfort, offers excuses, and demands that you live small. He knelt beside Riku. Riku closed his eyes and the physical pain sharpened. He tried to breathe through it, but the deeper agony came from within. The realization of how often he had surrendered to this false self in the past. Every abandoned promise, every unfinished goal, every day wasted in distraction and avoidance, they all led here. Haku spoke again, softer now. Minutes crawled by in silence. The sand continued to fall, and Riku's mind fought with everything it had: fear, frustration, self-doubt. But amid the storm, something unexpected happened. A small space opened inside him, a space untouched by panic or resistance, a space where the pain simply existed without defining him. Presence, pure presence. For the first time, Riku experienced what Haku meant: observation without attachment. His breath steadied. The pain softened, not because it disappeared, but because he stopped running from it. Haku, sensing the shift, nodded once. "There," he said. The final grains of sand fell. Riku had no idea how long he had been seated, but he knew something fundamental. This was only the beginning of breaking everything false within him. When Riku finally stood, his legs trembled beneath him. The room felt different, not because it had changed, but because he had. The silence no longer felt hostile. It felt revealing, like a mirror held up to the parts of himself he had ignored. But Master Haku was not finished. "Follow me," the monk said. They stepped outside into the cold mountain air. Frost clung to the stones, and the wind carried a sharp edge. Haku led Riku to a narrow courtyard behind the temple. At the center stood a single stone pillar, waist-high, worn smooth by time. Haku stopped. "This is where illusions die," he said. Riku waited, heart pounding. The monk pointed to the pillar. Riku obeyed. The stone was freezing beneath his palms. "Now speak," Haku commanded. "The story you tell yourself, the one that protects your weakness." Riku swallowed. A knot formed in his throat. He didn't want to speak, because he already knew what would come out. But Haku's gaze held him in place, steady, unblinking, ruthless in its compassion. Riku drew a shaky breath. "I tell myself, I'll start tomorrow," he whispered. "I tell myself I'm just tired, that I need rest." He paused, feeling a sting behind his eyes. The words spilled out now, raw, unfiltered. "I tell myself I'm trying, even when I'm not. I tell myself I'm okay, even when I'm drowning." The last sentence trembled in his voice. Haku stepped closer. "That is the false self," he said. "The voice that keeps a man small." Riku looked down. The stone pillar blurred through his tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. A painful clarity, long overdue. Haku continued. "The brain favors comfort. Neuroscience calls this homeostasis of identity." He tapped the pillar lightly. "But Shintei rejects familiarity." Haku walked a slow circle around Riku. Then he gave the next instruction.
Repeat your truths out loud. Riku tightened his grip on the stone. I have been lazy, he said. Each statement felt like shedding a layer of armor he never realized he wore. Haku nodded in approval. Good. A warrior does not hide from his truth. Riku breathed deeply. The cold air felt cleansing. Now, he asked quietly. Haku pointed back toward the temple. Now you begin again, without the weight of lies.
Without the armor of excuses. Riku felt the words settle inside him, not as inspiration, but as instruction, as reality. The false self was cracking. And through those cracks, something stronger, something ancient and disciplined began to emerge. The next morning arrived with a harsh chill, but Riku was awake before the cold could touch him. Something inside him had shifted during stage 1. He wasn't stronger, not yet, but he was finally honest, and honesty is the soil where discipline can take root. Master Haku stood outside the temple, facing the distant horizon. He did not greet Riku with encouragement or approval. Instead, he said, "Discipline is not a feeling. It is not motivation." He handed Riku a wooden bucket filled to the brim with water. Carry this around the temple. The task seemed simple, but with each step along the uneven stone path, the water trembled, sloshed, threatened to spill over. Riku tightened his grip, his arms burned, his breath shortened. By the second lap, frustration crept in. "This is pointless," he muttered. Haku appeared beside him as if summoned by the thought. "There is no pointless task," he said. Riku swallowed his irritation and kept walking. "Discipline is built through repetition," Haku continued. "Not dramatic acts of willpower, not heroic bursts of effort." Riku nodded, though his arms shook. By the 5th lap, he finally understood. This exercise had nothing to do with the bucket. It was about control, of breath, of movement, of mind. Presence in action. When Riku completed the final lap, Haku took the bucket and poured the remaining water onto the earth. "Good," he said. Riku blinked. Day after day, hour after hour. Riku exhaled deeply but lifted the bucket once more. The next task came after sunrise. Haku set a large stone in front of him, a heavy, jagged piece of mountain rock. "You will carry this up the summit path," Haku instructed. Riku stared at it. Why? Haku's answer was immediate. Riku waited for more explanation. None came. So he lifted the stone. His spine screamed in protest, but he carried it up the mountain path anyway. Frost crackled beneath his shoes. His breath formed clouds in the cold air. His legs trembled. Halfway up, he stopped, panting. Haku appeared at his side, hands clasped calmly behind him. "You have carried heavier burdens than this," the monk said. "Your regrets, your excuses, your fears." Riku felt a shock run through him. Haku pointed to the stone. Riku forced himself to continue. When he reached the summit ridge, the sun had just begun to rise. The sky shifted from deep indigo to burning gold, lighting the mountains with a fierce, ancient beauty. Riku placed the stone down, breathing hard. Haku nodded once, approval without softness. "Discipline is not suffering," he said. "It is alignment." They descended the path in silence. Back at the temple, Haku handed Riku a cloth and a small bowl of water. Riku frowned. "Yes, a warrior's life is not cluttered. Complexity invites chaos." Riku kneeled and began wiping the floor. Every stroke demanded focus. Every movement sharpened his awareness. The training was physical, but it reshaped his inner world. For the first time in years, Riku felt a sense of order forming inside him. Not motivation, not excitement, something deeper, self-respect. As the days unfolded, Riku discovered that Shintei was not a training system. It was a dismantling. Every routine that Master Haku imposed stripped away another layer of weakness he didn't know he carried. At dawn, he ran the perimeter of the mountain in silence. At mid-morning, he practiced slow, deliberate movements meant to align breath with intention. At noon, he performed simple chores: hauling water, chopping wood, scrubbing stone floors. Each task a meditation in presence. And throughout it all, Haku watched him with the eyes of a man who saw not what Riku was, but what he could be. One morning, after hours of labor, Haku approached with a new assignment: a sheet of parchment and a brush. "You will write one sentence," he said, "a vow, your discipline's anchor." Riku hesitated. Haku shook his head. Riku sat beside the temple door, brush trembling in his hand. Dozens of phrases came to mind: motivational lines, quotes he had saved, things he thought sounded strong. But none felt true. He closed his eyes, returning to the moment when his life had crumbled. The shame, the helplessness, the realization that he had abandoned himself. He wrote it slowly, the ink soaking into the parchment like a promise sealed in the earth. Haku read it and gave a single approving nod. From then on, each morning began the same way: the breath of cold air, the wake of intention, the brush meeting the parchment. The repetition carved the vow into him, deeper than motivation ever could. Throughout training, Riku noticed something unexpected. He no longer sought comfort. The simplicity of the temple, the predictability of the tasks, the firmness of Haku's expectations, they formed a rhythm that replaced chaos with clarity. And clarity, he realized, was the true root of discipline. Not force, not willpower, alignment. One afternoon, after hours of hauling wood, Haku motioned for Riku to stop. "You carry yourself differently," the monk observed. Riku wiped sweat from his brow. "You feel clean," Haku corrected. "Discipline purifies the mind. When your actions match your intentions, the spirit stops fighting itself." Riku breathed in deeply. The mountain air smelled sharper, almost sweet. Haku continued. "Most men fail because they live divided. They think one thing, feel another, and do a third. Their energy fractures, their purpose weakens. A disciplined man is one thing, unified." Riku felt those words resonate through him like a tuning fork. He had lived divided for so long. Now he was beginning to feel the power of becoming whole. As the sun dipped behind the peaks, painting the temple in shades of amber, Haku gave him the final task of Stage 2. He placed a round stone in Riku's hands. Smooth, polished by years of storms. "Keep this with you," the monk said. "When your mind wavers, feel its weight. Remember the vow you wrote with your hand." Riku closed his fingers around the stone. It was small, yet heavy with meaning. That night, lying on the simple mat, he felt a calm strength spreading through him. Not the strength of achievement, but the strength of becoming dependable to himself. A strength he had not felt since he was a child. Before excuses, before fear, before the world convinced him to shrink. Haku had been right. Discipline wasn't punishment. It was a reunion with the man he was meant to be. The turning point of Shintei was not marked by a new exercise, a heavier burden, or a more demanding test. It arrived quietly, like a shift in the wind, or the moment before dawn when darkness holds its breath. On the morning Stage 3 began, Haku led Riku to a narrow trail that wound behind the temple, disappearing into a grove of ancient cedar trees. Their trunks rose like pillars of a forgotten cathedral, the canopy above filtering the sunlight into thin columns of gold. Riku walked beside him, expecting instruction, but Haku said nothing. After several minutes, they reached a clearing. The ground was soft with moss. A single stone sat at the center, a meditation seat shaped naturally by time. Haku turned to Riku. Riku obeyed, lowering himself onto the cool stone. He asked. Haku shook his head. Riku frowned. "Nothing," Haku repeated. No breathing technique, no posture correction, no mantra. Riku shifted uncomfortably. That was physical stillness, Haku said. He stepped back. There is a difference. In stage 1, you fought the mind. Riku closed his eyes, unsure of what to expect. At first, the sounds of the forest filled his awareness. The distant echo of wind, the rustle of leaves, the faint rhythm of his own heart. Then the thoughts began. Unsorted, uninvited, unrelenting. You're wasting time. What if this doesn't work? You'll go back to your old life anyway. You're just pretending to change. Riku felt irritation rising. He clenched his jaw, trying to force the thoughts to stop. Riku inhaled. Do not run from the mind, Haku continued. Do not fight it. Riku loosened his shoulders. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. The forest seemed to suspend itself around him. Thoughts continued to appear, but as he watched them rather than resisted them, something subtle shifted. The thoughts lost their aggression. They no longer pierced him. They drifted. A memory surfaced. A moment from childhood, when he had felt proud simply for waking early and helping his father carry tools. The memory felt pure, like a forgotten truth resurfacing. Then another memory, one of failure, a disappointment that once haunted him, now softened by clarity rather than shame. Both memories flowed through him without control, without attachment. Haku's voice broke the silence. When the mind is quiet, truth appears. Not dramatic truth, not mystical truth. Riku opened his eyes. The forest seemed brighter, colors sharper, the air lighter. Haku approached. Most suffering, he said, comes not from the experiences of life, but from the stories the mind writes about them. Riku felt those words settle inside him like a seed. He understood something now. Stillness was not emptiness. It was exposure, a clear mirror reflecting the shape of his inner world. He realized how often he had lived in reaction, reacting to fears, distractions, doubts. Not because they controlled him, but because he had never stopped long enough to truly see them. Now he could. In the stillness, truth was not frightening. It was liberating. The next phase of stillness took place not in the forest, but deeper, inside a stone chamber carved beneath the temple. A place Haku called the Hall of Echoes. It was almost completely dark. A single opening in the ceiling allowed a thin blade of light to fall onto the center of the room. Dust floated through it like drifting snow. Riku stood at the entrance, uncertain. Haku spoke quietly. Silence reveals truth. Solitude reveals the self. But darkness... He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Riku felt his heartbeat quicken. Haku motioned him inside. Riku stepped in. The air was colder, heavy. It felt as though the room had absorbed generations of unspoken struggles. Riku asked, "Because the mind fills darkness with its own shadows." Riku swallowed, lowering himself into the thin circle of light. Haku stepped out and closed the door. Darkness swallowed everything. At first, Riku tried to control his breathing, remembering the rituals of Stage 2, but that only made his anxiety tighten. He heard the thump of his heartbeat in his ears louder than the quiet itself. Then the thoughts came. You shouldn't be here. You're not strong enough. What if you never become the man you want to be? What if discipline fades again? What if nothing changes? Fear bloomed inside him, thick and suffocating. He wanted to stand, to shout, to ask Haku to open the door. But instead, he remembered the forest clearing, the stone seat, the river of thoughts he had learned to observe instead of fight. So he tried again. He let the fear speak.
The darkness made it louder, more visceral. His mind began projecting images, memories, failures, imagined futures where he remained stuck and small. The shadows of his life stretched long across the chamber. But slowly, very slowly, another shift occurred. He noticed that the fears did not move him physically. His breath still flowed. His body remained grounded. The darkness, for all its power, had not harmed him. Presence settled over him like a cloak. And in that moment, Riku saw it. Fear was not an enemy. Fear was a messenger. A signal pointing towards the parts of his life he had neglected, the paths he had avoided, the responsibilities he had postponed. He inhaled deeply, letting the truth settle. Then something unexpected happened. The darkness no longer felt threatening. It felt honest, pure, a place where nothing existed except what he carried inside himself. Another realization surfaced, an uncomfortable but liberating one. Most of his suffering had come from avoiding this silence.
When he opened his eyes again, the blade of light above seemed brighter, though he knew it hadn't changed. Only he had. His heartbeat slowed. His body softened. His mind grew still. For the first time, he didn't feel like someone running from fears. He felt like someone ready to listen to them, understand them, so he could rise above them. The door opened quietly. Haku stepped inside, observing him with unreadable eyes. Haku nodded. That is the awakening. Stillness is the sword that cuts through illusion. He placed a hand briefly on Riku's shoulder. Riku breathed slowly, feeling a profound calm, one deeper than confidence, quieter than pride. A calm that came from knowing his inner world at last. The morning Riku was to descend the mountain, the sky unfolded in shades of silver and pale blue, quiet, clean, untouched. He stood at the edge of the temple grounds, backpack on his shoulders, the weight of it strangely light compared to the burdens he had carried on his first day. Master Haku joined him without announcement, stepping beside him with the silent authority of someone who had witnessed countless transformations. "You are not returning as the man who climbed here," Haku said. Riku bowed his head slightly. Haku shook his head. "Clarity is not something you keep," he said. "It is something you cultivate, like breath, like discipline." Riku absorbed the words slowly. They felt final, yet grounding. The monk continued. "Your training is not complete. It never will be." He turned to face Riku fully. "Most men who leave here do not fail because the world is difficult." Riku felt those words settle like stones in the soil of his spirit. Then Haku handed him something wrapped in cloth. Riku unfolded the cloth to find the small round stone, the same one Haku had given him during stage 2. Smooth, quiet, heavy with meaning. "Carry it," Haku instructed. Riku closed his fingers around the stone. The words felt stronger now, etched into his identity rather than ink on paper. Haku walked with him a short distance down the mountain path. As they walked, he spoke. "You will face distractions again. Comfort will whisper to you." Riku listened, each sentence sharpening his awareness. He stopped and tapped 2 fingers against Riku's chest, over the heart. Presence. The ability to see your thoughts before they control you. The discipline to align action with intention. Riku nodded, feeling gratitude rise through him. "Ma?" he asked quietly. Haku actually smiled. Barely, but unmistakably. "Then fail with awareness, and begin again. The rebuilt man does not fear falling." A silence passed between them, rich and full. Riku bowed deeply. Not as a gesture of respect alone, but as a final surrender of who he used to be. When he straightened, Haku had already taken a step back toward the temple. "Go," the monk said softly. Riku turned toward the winding trail descending the mountain. The air felt sharper. The path looked clearer. With each step downward, he realized something unexpected. He was not leaving the mountain. He was carrying it with him. The discipline, the presence, the truth revealed in darkness, the vow written at dawn, the silence that had rebuilt his spirit from the ground up. Everything was coming with him. He felt ready, not invincible, not perfect, but grounded in a strength that did not need to shout to be known. The descent into the world felt strangely foreign. The mountain air thinned into the familiar heaviness of civilization. Noise replaced silence. Movement replaced stillness. And yet, none of it disturbed him. Riku walked through the small town at the base of the peaks, noticing details he had never cared to notice before. The slow rhythm of shopkeepers opening their doors, the scent of steam rising from early morning food stalls, the murmur of life beginning its daily cycle. He felt no rush, no anxiety, no need to fill the quiet within him. His mind was steady, anchored by the stone in his pocket and the vow in his chest. But the real test came sooner than he expected. At the bus station, he spotted someone from his old life, an old colleague who had witnessed his collapse months before. A man who likely still remembered Riku as unreliable, scattered, unmotivated. The colleague lifted a hand. "Riku, hey man, haven't seen you in ages. You disappeared." A small part of Riku felt the familiar pull, the instinct to shrink, to explain, to apologize for not being who he once pretended to be. Instead, he breathed. Presence flooded in, calm and sharp. "I'm rebuilding," Riku said simply. The colleague blinked, unsure how to respond. Riku didn't elaborate. He didn't try to justify. Truth had no need for decoration. They exchanged a few polite words, but Riku noticed something subtle. The old anxiety that used to define moments like this was gone. He boarded the bus feeling stronger than before, not because of the interaction, but because he had met his old identity face to face and did not return to it. When he arrived home, the air inside his apartment felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because he was no longer the man who lived there before. The room that once symbolized stagnation now felt like a blank page. He unpacked his single bag, placed the round stone on his desk, and without hesitation rewrote the vow he had practiced on the mountain. "I will not betray the man I am becoming." The ink dried quickly. The meaning did not. He began resetting his life, not with grand gestures, but with simple acts of alignment. He cleaned the room. He deleted apps that once consumed his attention. He organized his workspace. He wrote out a simple, intentional morning ritual. He reached out to one person he had been avoiding, not with excuses, but with presence. Each action felt like placing a brick in a new foundation. A foundation built, not on motivation, but on the steadiness he had forged in silence. Days passed, then weeks. Old temptations whispered as expected: comfort, distraction, shortcuts, procrastination. But Riku recognized them instantly, like echoes of a voice he no longer obeyed. One evening, while walking home, he felt the stone in his pocket and paused beneath the city lights. But this time, it wasn't a promise. It was a statement of identity. He had rebuilt. Not fully, never fully, but enough to walk with presence. Enough to choose discomfort over avoidance. Enough to face fear without surrender. Enough to align action with intention. He realized then the greatest lesson of Shintei. The mountain had never been a place. It had been a mirror that revealed who he truly was and who he could be when stripped of distraction, ego, and fear. He looked out over the city, alive, chaotic, overflowing with unseen battles, and felt no intimidation, only clarity, only purpose,
only the quiet strength of a man who had rebuilt himself from the ground of his spirit. Final moral: to rebuild your life, return to the ground of your spirit. Destroy the false, strengthen the true, and walk forward with unwavering presence.